Lately, all Greg could think about was Lisa, the tall beauty who had just started working in his office. It was pure chance when he bumped into her in the hallway. But man, something just clicked. Where the hell did this knockout come from, and how the hell didn't I notice her sooner? He thought as he made his way back to his office. As soon as he stepped inside, he wasted no time and called in Josh, his assistant. Josh came in, greeting Greg with a casual grin, and Sarah, the secretary, followed behind with a tray holding 2 coffees. Yo, Josh, where'd that total stunner come from? How the hell did I miss her? Greg asked, eyebrows raised as he picked up one of the cups. You didn't miss her, Greg, Josh chuckled. You literally signed her hiring papers yourself. Remember, I told you we were bringing in a new sales specialist? Oh, right, from the competitor, right? That's her. Greg paused for a second, thinking back. I signed the papers without even meeting her, and now I see her in the hallway. Damn, she's a looker. No doubt about that, he said with a sly grin, glancing over at Josh. So, what's her story? Married? Kids? How old? She's divorced, got an 8-year-old son, but he lives with her mom in another city. She's 33. Anything else you want to know? Josh said, trying not to laugh at how predictable Greg was. Nah, that's all for now. Thanks, man, Greg replied, a thoughtful expression crossing his face as he took a sip of coffee. His mind was already spinning, making plans, scheming a little, and who knows, maybe something more. Lisa wasn't just some new face in the office. She had definitely made a lasting impression on him. Josh could already tell that Lisa had definitely caught Greg's attention. It wasn't hard to see why. Lisa was one of those women who just turned heads. She had that kind of beauty that was hard to ignore, with her elegant features and graceful presence. But Josh? Nah, he wasn't that guy. He had his own family, a wife he adored, and a young daughter who was the light of his life. Gorgeous women came and went in the world, but for Josh, none of that mattered. He wasn't the type to let his eyes wander. Now, Greg? He was different. Sure, he was married too, and had a 10-year-old son, Tommy, but his marriage to Linda? That was a whole other story. Their relationship was more about routine than love. Linda was the perfect housewife, always ironing his shirts to crisp perfection, cooking up delicious meals, and seeing him off to work every morning with a smile. She didn't work, and honestly, Greg liked it that way. He made enough money to keep the family more than comfortable, and he preferred having her at home. Linda was his go-to for everything domestic. She was the type who could host a last-minute dinner party and have the house and food ready within the hour. She was that efficient, always making sure everything ran smoothly. It's like she was built for it, and Greg? Well, he was used to it. He liked knowing he could count on her to keep their home life in perfect order. But outside of that, Greg wasn't really involved with his family. Yeah, he brought in the money, kept the bills paid, but that was about it. He never went on vacations with Linda and Tommy. Whenever they wanted to go somewhere, he'd just send them off on their own. Family outings to the movies or any kind of events. Not his thing. Even when he hit the sauna, he didn't go with his wife. Nope, he went with other women. On the surface, it all looked like he had it made. Good job, nice house, perfect wife. But in reality, Greg was just going through the motions, stuck in his habits, and his marriage to Linda? That was just another routine he'd grown comfortable with. Linda had always been a stay-at-home mom, and she knew damn well that's where she belonged. Greg made that crystal clear from day one. It had been that way for 12 long years, ever since they tied the knot. Back then, Greg was just your regular guy, fresh out of college, and Linda was this simple girl, the kind of girl who just wanted a good life, a family. Greg saw something in her, potential. She was going to make the perfect wife and mom, and you know what? He wasn't wrong. Linda stepped up, took on that role like a pro, cooking, cleaning, raising their son, doing everything that a perfect wife was supposed to do. But once Greg got that promotion, started running things at the office, something flipped in him. He turned into this cocky, arrogant guy, walking around like he owned the place. And with the new job came new temptations. Greg started cheating on Linda like it was nothing. No guilt, no second thoughts. It was almost as if he saw it as his right now that he was the big shot. Linda? She didn't have a clue. Or maybe she did, but just chose to look the other way. Every time Greg said he had to work late or had some business meeting, she just smiled and sent him off, never questioning where he really was. Josh glanced at his boss with a knowing smirk. You got a thing for Lisa, huh? Man, I know that look. Looks like it's bye-bye, Megan, huh? Megan had been Greg's side piece for a while now. They used to go way back, old college buddies, and then reconnected about 5 years ago at some networking event. Since then, It had been all casual between them. Nothing serious, just a little fling that had stuck around longer than it probably should have. Greg and Josh had worked together for years, and in that time, they'd built a strong relationship. They trusted each other with everything, personal stuff, work stuff, whatever. But when it came to business, Greg didn't play. He held Josh accountable for everything, didn't let things slide, even though they were tight. Still, there'd never been any real issues between them. Josh was solid. He handled his work like a champ and had Greg's back, no matter what. And as far as the whole Megan thing went, Josh didn't pry. But he could see what was happening. Greg was losing interest in Megan, shifting his attention to Lisa, and it was only a matter of time before he made his move. Lisa couldn't hide her excitement when she first met Greg. Landing this job felt like a fresh start, especially since her friend Emily had hooked her up. Emily had been working there for a while and knew exactly what had gone down at Lisa's last job. The whole thing had been messy. Lisa had always been a go-getter, someone who never backed down when it came to getting what she wanted. But her confidence had finally met its match when her previous boss's wife got suspicious and caught on to what was happening. It didn't end well for Lisa. She had to leave to avoid an even bigger scandal. As soon as Lisa saw Greg, her curiosity piqued. Not bad-looking, this Greg, she thought to herself as their eyes met. She noticed the way he looked at her, like a predator eyeing his prey. It was intense, almost like he was figuring out how to make his move. Let's see how this plays out, she told herself, letting the moment pass but filing it away for later. She didn't have to wait long. A week later, Lisa found herself in Greg's office, handing him some paperwork. He took the documents, acting all professional, but Lisa could tell his mind was somewhere else. He wasn't thinking about the paperwork. He was thinking about her. "So, Lisa," Greg started, his voice shifting from formal to casual in an instant. "What are you up to tonight? You free?" Lisa picked up on the sudden change in his tone, a small smirk playing on her lips. It was clear he was switching gears. "Yeah, I'm free." "Why do you ask?" she replied, knowing exactly where this was heading, but playing it cool. "Well, I was thinking, maybe we could grab dinner. What do you say?" Lisa didn't hesitate for a second. "Sure, I'm down," she agreed, her heart racing just a little. She knew this was only the beginning of whatever this was between them, and something told her it was gonna be one wild ride. And just like that, Greg and Lisa's whirlwind romance kicked off, spinning them both into something bigger, something neither of them saw coming. It was wild. One minute they were flirting over drinks, the next they were practically inseparable. Lisa had this fire in her, something Greg hadn't felt in ages, and he was hooked. It wasn't long before everything they did felt like an adventure, full of excitement and passion that he hadn't even realized was missing from his life with Linda. Then one day, just when they were about to take off on a trip to Hawaii, Lisa dropped the bomb. "Greg, I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air like a punch to the gut, but instead of knocking the wind out of him, they filled him with this unexpected rush of excitement. He wasn't scared. In fact, he was thrilled. This was it, his fresh start, his chance to finally live the life he wanted. He wasted no time. Greg filed for divorce from Linda without much thought. In his mind, what they had wasn't even real love. Sure, they had history, but the spark? The passion? It had fizzled out long ago. With Lisa, though, everything was different. She was the one he'd been waiting for all these years, the one who made him feel alive. And now, with a baby on the way, it was like the universe was giving him a do-over, a clean slate. Just a few months after the divorce, Greg proposed to Lisa. She said yes, of course, and soon their daughter was born. Greg was completely head over heels. He adored his little girl, spending every free moment with her, doting on her like she was the center of his universe. And that's when it hit him. What he had with Linda, that wasn't love. Not the kind of love he had now with Lisa. This was the real deal. After the divorce, Greg wasn't interested in dragging things out, so he offered Linda a deal. "Look, I could leave you with nothing," he told her straight up, without much emotion. "You never worked or contributed financially. But because of Tommy, I'll pay child support. I'll also give you enough for a 2-bedroom apartment. You can buy it, get a job, and move on with your life. I'm staying here with Lisa and our daughter." Linda knew she couldn't fight him. Greg was a man who made up his mind and didn't look back. So, she agreed to the terms. She bought a small, but decent apartment and had enough left over to furnish it. As much as it stung to lose everything else, she was thankful at least for that. Life took a sharp turn for her. She got a job and threw herself into raising Tommy. He was her world now. Tommy, though, he couldn't let go of the anger. He hated his father for leaving, for never checking in, for acting like they didn't exist. At first, he waited for a call, for a visit, for something. But Greg never reached out. It was like he vanished. Meanwhile, Greg was living it up with Lisa and their daughter, jetting off on trips, living this picture-perfect life while Tommy was left wondering why his dad didn't care about his school projects, his sports games, or just him. Whenever Linda tried to bring it up, telling Tommy maybe things would change, he'd cut her off. "Mom, he doesn't care. He never did. Why should I?" Time flew by. Linda had finally retired, and Tommy? Well, he tied the knot. He and his wife, Olivia, moved in with Linda, and Linda couldn't have been happier to have them around. Olivia wasn't from the area, and the young couple didn't see the point in blowing cash on rent. Linda, always being the doting mom, let Olivia off the hook from any housework, and they spent a lot of time reflecting on how rough life had been after the divorce. There was this one time when Linda had asked Greg if he could lend Tommy a hand getting into college, but Greg's cold response cut deep. "He's your son. Handle it yourself." Still, they made it work. Tommy finished school, landed himself a solid job, and eventually, he and Olivia bought their own place. Moving out was the right call, even though they had all gotten along just fine under Linda's roof. Now, Linda would drop by often, and the bond between them stayed just as tight as ever. As for Greg, he always thought he'd be one of those guys who stayed young and full of life, no matter what. He made good money, life was smooth, and things were going his way. But Father Time catches up with everyone. His daughter was married now, and it was just him and Lisa left in the house. In his 60s, Greg was still grinding at work, but the signs of age were creeping in. He started getting out of breath and feeling weak, something he'd never experienced before. "You should really see a doctor," Lisa said one day, her voice gentle but concerned. "Might be time for a checkup." "I'm fine," Greg waved it off like it was nothing, not wanting to admit anything might be seriously wrong. But soon enough, everything came crashing down. Greg was rushed to the hospital straight from the office. A heart attack. It hit him like a ton of bricks. One minute, he thought he was invincible, and the next, his whole world spun out of control. He spent 2 long, agonizing weeks in that sterile hospital room, recovering from the ordeal. The doctors didn't mince words. Slow down, take it easy, spend more time outdoors, and, worst of all, consider retirement. Lisa wasn't having it. Retirement? No freaking way. "He's not staying home and cramping my style. Let him keep working," she said, waving off the suggestion like it was the most ridiculous thing she'd ever heard. After 30 years together, their relationship had cooled off to a dull routine. There was no warmth, no real connection anymore. And Greg? He knew damn well that being stuck at home would drive him nuts. So, against the doctor's advice, he went right back to work. But just a month later, disaster struck again. Another heart attack, this one way worse. And this time, Lisa didn't seem all that bothered. She barely visited him in the hospital, finding any excuse to hang out with her friends instead, sipping lattes at trendy cafes or wandering through art galleries. The smell of antiseptics and the sight of her weak, bedridden husband? She wasn't about to let that ruin her good time. When Greg was finally discharged, Lisa had already made up her mind. She filed for divorce. "I'm not sticking around to be his nurse. He can hire someone for that," she said, her voice icy cold, like she was cutting him loose from her life with no second thoughts. Lisa moved fast. She finalized the divorce papers in no time, bought Greg a small apartment, and even hired a nurse named Nancy to take care of him. Greg didn't put up a fight. He didn't have the energy, and honestly, what was the point? Lisa had taken charge, moved on with her life, and left him behind like a bad memory. Even his daughter, who once adored him, didn't want to keep in touch anymore. To her, he was just a reminder of the past, someone she'd grown distant from, like a fading shadow. Greg found himself thinking about his first wife, Linda, and their son, Tommy, more and more as the days dragged on. Back when he left them, chasing after a new life, a new start, he hadn't looked back. But now, with his health failing, and the money he had mostly going toward medication and paying Nancy, his nurse, the past started haunting him. Regret gnawed at him, growing louder with each heartbeat that wasn't as strong as it used to be. One day, with a heavy heart, Greg decided to ask Nancy for a favor. He gave her Linda's address and asked her to try and find her. He didn't have the guts to reach out himself. He figured Linda would probably slam the door in his face if he showed up. But still, a part of him hoped. Nancy came back later, but the look on her face wasn't promising. "Your ex-wife, she refused to come see you, but she gave me your son's phone number," she said gently. Greg felt a knot tighten in his chest. It wasn't the best news, but it was something. Maybe Tommy, his son, would understand. Maybe he could ask for a second chance, at least a little help, a chance to go to a rehab center and recover. With trembling hands, he dialed the number, not sure what to expect. Tommy picked up, but his voice was colder than a winter wind. "I don't have a father," Tommy spat, his words hitting Greg harder than any heart attack ever could. Greg sat there, stunned, unable to say anything. The silence on the other end of the line said it all. He was truly alone. Meanwhile, Linda and Tommy had talked about it before. Linda's heart ached knowing Greg was all alone now. "Tommy, should we visit him? He's got nobody left but a nurse. His new family, they just abandoned him," she said one night, her voice filled with sadness. But Tommy wasn't swayed. His anger was still fresh, even after all these years. "Mom, did he think about us when he left? When you were struggling, when you needed him? Where was he? He didn't care then, so why should we care now?" Tommy shot back, his words sharp with the pain of old wounds. Linda sighed heavily. "I know, son. I remember it all. But sometimes you just have to let go. Forgive, for your own sake. Let's visit him tomorrow." Tommy, after a long pause, reluctantly agreed. But that night, before they could make it, Nancy called Linda. Her voice was soft, apologetic. "I'm sorry to tell you this, but Greg passed away. It happened a few hours ago." The news hit them both hard. In the end, they didn't get to see him, didn't get to say anything, good or bad. The next day, Linda and Tommy arranged the funeral. They buried Greg quietly, without much ceremony. It wasn't for him. It was for them, for closure. Lisa, his second wife, and his daughter didn't even bother to show up. To them, Greg had already been dead long before he actually passed. If he didn't matter in life, why would he matter in death?